Today's daily dose of math is using a map to find the scale and answer questions. This is for the Math P023 course. Here we have a map that shows a neighborhood. We have some of the things marked. A couple of streets are marked. We have the piano shop marked with a dot. We have this restaurant that has an M as a logo marked with a dot. And we have down here a church marked with a dot. When we are answering these questions, we use a ruler and we measure right off the map as part of the process. And the dot is there to help avoid confusion. Do I measure from this side of the M or from this top part of the M? Students would get different answers if they all chose a different part of the M. So people should use the dot. Okay, the first thing is, what is the scale? The scale is given. But just because it's given here doesn't mean the answer is already there. You have to read this and explain what scale you have. Now this involves using a ruler. On a map, on a piece of paper, often you can tell just by eye that this little bar is, say, 1 centimeter long. And then you don't actually have to measure it. But we have a more of a tricky situation here because I'm doing this very large on a chalkboard. So I'm going to measure it, and what I'm finding is that little bar is 10 centimeters long. So my scale is 10 centimeters, represents 200 meters. It's a 10 to 200 scale. But we have to remember that the top is in centimeters and the bottom is in meters, so that we don't end up with the wrong unit of measure at the end of a question that we're answering. The next thing I'm going to do is to simplify the scale. This is just simplifying of a fraction. This one is going to simplify quite nicely so that there's a 1 in the top. But even if the numbers don't cooperate and you get weird decimals, it's still very useful to have a scale that has a 1 on the top. And we're going to prove that when we answer C and D. Because for C, we're going to use this scale to answer the question, and for D, we're going to use the simplified scale. What I'm doing is I'm reducing a fraction. I'm dividing the top and the bottom by the greatest common factor of these two numbers. I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 10. And that gives me 1 on the top, and it gives me 20 on the bottom. Still, the 1 is centimeters, and the 20 is meters. Now we're using the unsimplified scale, the 10 over 200. I'm going to sit down so I write more neatly to answer this question about the distance between CDC Vimo and the church. I forgot to mark CDC Vimo, so I'm going to put it on now. So I'm measuring with my ruler the distance between the dot for CDC Vimo and the dot for the church, and I am seeing 22 centimeters. I build my proportion with the scale on the left side. I know that the ruler measure, which is the 10 centimeters from the beginning, is on the top here, so the ruler measure, the 22 centimeters I just measured, also has to be on the top. That allows me to build my proportion so everything is in the right place. Cross multiplying, we get 10x equals 22 times 200. 10x equals 4,400. And then I divide both sides by 10. These cancel, my x is isolated and is equal to 440. And it's going to be in meters. Because the 200 was in meters, it was on the bottom, the x is on the bottom, that means my final answer is meters. The church and CDC Vimo are 440 meters apart. That was C. Now for D, we're measuring a different distance, which is between piano shop and CDC Vimo, but we're using the simplified scale, 1 over 20. So I put the simplified scale on the left. It still has centimeters on the top, meters on the bottom. So I'm going to put centimeters on the top on this side, and I'm measuring in centimeters between CDC Vimo and the piano shop, and I'm getting 40. X goes in the last remaining spot, cross multiply, we have 1x equals 20 times 40. 1x means x. We don't have to show the 1. 20 times 40 is 800. We have our answer. And because it's on the bottom, meters is on the bottom in the scale, we have 800 meters as our answer. CDC Vimo and Piano Shop are about 800 meters apart. That makes sense when we compare it to the other answer. We can see that CDC Vimo and the church are closer together than CDC Vimo and the Piano Shop. It does look like it's about half. Well, 440 is about half of 800. So we can see that we've gotten the right answer, and it doesn't matter if we use the 10 over 200 unsimplified scale or the 1 over 20 simplified scale. Both of them gave us the right answer. So a student who's answering a question like this is allowed to use the unsimplified scale. If they want, they will get the right answer. The only time you are forced to use a simplified scale is if the question tells you that you have to, or if the teacher who corrects your work tells you that it is their standard that you must. This is using a scale on a map, which is a scale diagram, to find the scale and to answer questions in the situation where they're given a scale printed on the map, which happens very often. This happens with Google Maps. So if you look at a Google map to try and figure out directions to somewhere you're going, you will see one of these on the map, and you'll be able to use it in the same way that we've done here.